All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today. We've got a great webinar topic for you today in terms of networking requirements for GCP in a multi-cloud enterprise environment. We've got some fantastic speakers. We're welcoming Sam Zindi from who is with Google, and he is a cloud customer engineer with the cloud group. He's going to be talking quite a bit about Anthos and Anthos in a multi-cloud environment, including GCP. So excited to hear from him. And we'd also like to welcome Spence Nelson, who's a senior cloud network engineer for Workfront. Congratulations on the acquisition, Spence, now an Adobe company. We're excited to have you on the call as well. And then finally, Shahzad Ali, who's one of our principal solution architects and spends a lot of time working with customers in the field with their GCP and multi-cloud environments. So with that, let me just give some background about Aviatrix for those of you who are not familiar with Aviatrix, and maybe this is the first time you're understanding what Aviatrix does. To position this, many of you have built your careers on networking on-premise, maybe building some private clouds, and we saw an evolution from a physical infrastructure only to a virtual infrastructure with virtual servers and virtual networking. But as we went to public cloud, there's been an architectural gap here because now you don't have access to that underlying physical and virtual infrastructure. This is what the cloud providers are offering as their infrastructure as a service. And they're exposing basic network constructs, and that's what you have access to. Now, that's different in each one of the clouds. So the basic network constructs in AWS are different from those in Azure, different from Google. So this is where Aviatrix plays. The red box on top of those native constructs is where Aviatrix adds advanced networking and security capabilities in addition to supporting the native constructs. So you'll see as we go through the presentation that that's where we fit. Now, a lot of times people get confused in terms of hearing about SD-WAN being multi-cloud, private connectivity like Equinix or PurePort or Megaport being multi-cloud, or SASE with Palo Alto Networks and so forth being multi-cloud. All of these are multi-cloud from the standpoint of connecting to multiple clouds, but they're not actually doing the networking in the cloud. So we support all of these different solutions where they connect into the cloud, and that becomes the handoff point into the multi-cloud networking and security that we deliver inside each one of the clouds. Now, everything we do is around a multi-cloud network architecture. And the foundation of that is the multi-cloud transit, because this is where everything that's accessing the cloud, the access layer coming from branch offices or data centers, connects into the cloud. And it's also where the application layer in each one of the clouds connects to be able to connect to other application environments, either within a single cloud or across multiple clouds. So this is where our Aviatrix Cloud Network Platform exists. This is how we deliver those advanced networking and security and operational services and provide service insertion for our partners like Palo Alto Networks or Checkpoint or SD-WAN connections that I was talking about before. Now, if we drill into the platform just a little bit, one thing to recognize is that this is not a SaaS or managed service. This is software that you license and run on your instances in the cloud. And there are some key components here. Number one is the Aviatrix controller. And this you can think of as the brain of the operations. Because it's talking to the Aviatrix gateways where we're delivering the advanced networking security solutions and becomes the Aviatrix transit. But the controller is also talking the native languages of each one of the clouds through their public APIs and giving us the ability to create this cloud networking abstraction layer so that we can have a multi-cloud Terraform provider, for example, that you can write one single module that's going to be able to deliver a repeatable design in any one of the clouds because the controller is talking the language of the native capabilities in the cloud. And then finally, our gateways are in the data plane. So we're providing all of the necessary information, the data, to our Aviatrix Copilot visualization platform. And as you can see on the right, being able to do things like show flow analytics and drill down into particular flows, see the ports and protocols, troubleshoot application layer issues and so forth as across multiple clouds. And then also do multi-cloud dynamic topology mapping. So we will show you your entire network infrastructure as a map across all of your cloud environments. And that's just not just a pretty picture. You can actually drill into those and get very detailed information about what's going on in the network. So let's show how this kind of comes together. But before I go into expanding across multiple clouds, let me let you understand that that simple picture of a hub and spoke architecture has a lot going on underneath it. So in this case, you can see each VPC has multiple availability zones, and we'll have a gateway in each one of those availability zones connecting to a transit hub that has multiple gateways. So we're creating an always on, full mesh, equal cost, multipath, high availability, active network between VPCs and the transit. And then we can do that in multiple clouds and carry that full mesh capability across multiple clouds. So as that, so we may represent that as a simple hub and spoke architecture, but there's actually a lot going on underneath that. We're doing end-to-end encryption so that you can meet a lot of your customer requirements for corporate and regulatory compliance. We're leveraging the same underlying infrastructure that the cloud providers themselves use for redundancy and native services and so forth. And we're providing always on high availability where the controller is actually looking at the state of this network all the time and being able to do self-healing and auto remediation if we see anything going on. So let's see how this expands out. Of course, all of our customers start in a single region of a single cloud, but very soon you can see you can expand to multiple regions. And you start seeing that repeatable hub and spoke architecture that then takes you across multiple clouds. And this is repeatable. So like I mentioned, you can use that Terraform provider and you can spin up a hub and spoke architecture in Azure just the same way that you spin it up in Google Cloud or in AWS. We provide a high performance encryption capability. So many customers are connecting to the cloud from the data center with their Google Cloud Interconnect or an Azure Express Route or AWS Direct Connect. We can actually give you wire speed IPsec encryption up to 25 gig per connection. So when you do that in a full mesh connection, you're actually getting 50 gig of IPsec encryption from the data center into the cloud. And then we can do up to 90 gig inside the cloud for this high performance IPsec encryption. Of course, as I mentioned, it's encrypted by default in terms of end-to-end encryption. This just gives you the high performance capability. And we can do multi-cloud network segmentation. So many of you may be familiar with doing security groups and having connection policies within a single cloud. We extend that and make it possible across multiple clouds. So for instance, you could see the green dots being or the blue dot being a production workload or environment in all of the different clouds here. We also provide service insertion for things like Palo Alto Networks, next generation firewalls, or be able to do service chaining with an F5 big IP and do SSL decryption so that we can pass a packet through a service chain, for instance, into a next generation firewall and then re-encrypt the traffic. the data plane is also feeding that visualization platform that I talked about, Copilot. So we're giving you all of the data necessary to be able to visualize and troubleshoot what's going on in your multi-cloud network. And then once you have this multi-cloud network, many of our customers want to use cases like connecting their branch offices or their remote users, doing secure ingress and egress to the internet. And then finally, of course, being able to leverage the native cloud construct. So we're not just replacing things that are there, we're actually leveraging capabilities in the cloud and being able to take advantage of those capabilities in addition to adding enterprise functionality that our customers are looking for. So with that, I want to turn over to Sam and have Sam talk a little bit about Anthos and the multi-cloud capabilities that Google is providing with Anthos. And then we'll talk about how that leverages some of the capabilities of Aviatrix when it comes to enterprises needing more than just IP connectivity, but needing advanced networking capability and security across a multi-cloud environment. Sam?
Thanks, Rod. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I want to start with what is Anthos? So basically, Anthos gives you a platform to run Kubernetes clusters anywhere in both public clouds and also within your on-prem environments. So you'll get this consistent managed Kubernetes experience with simple installs and upgrades that are validated by Google. So you can run those clusters on your existing virtualized environment or your bare metal servers within your on-prem, or you can run those clusters on different public cloud providers. So for a long time, application deployment was focused on VMs before the containers were really widely accepted. As you know, the issue with VM is that in order to build and maintain workload portability, utilizing them can be very challenging. So to address the issue, one solution is to use containers and Kubernetes. So in terms of networking, Anthos takes advantage of a lot of existing networking capabilities within the public cloud and on-prem. As you know, networking is the foundation for all distributed computing. Yeah, so now the question is, why to run Kubernetes in multiple environments? There are different drivers. First is isolation, which provides you the separation of control plane and data plane to improve reliability and address security needs. Second is location requirement, which basically you decide where to place your services to address things such as availability, latency, or locality needs. And third is scaling, which is related to expanding services beyond their practical limits. So as you see on this slide, some use cases when you consider multi-cluster Kubernetes are low latency services to provide fast connectivity between clusters. There is also HA requirement. For example, you want to run clusters in a DR site. Another common use case is data locality. I think most of us are familiar with GDPR requirements. Another common use case is to separate environments. And I see this a lot. So basically isolating clusters that are used by different teams and for different purposes, such as separating dev, staging, and prod environment. Another use case that's very applicable to our conversation today is to run clusters in different computing environment as part of your hybrid or multi-cloud approach. And also, lastly, for executing a successful migration, it makes sense to deploy additional clusters. So these are really good reasons to consider a multi-cluster Kubernetes, and in a lot of cases, basically a multi-cloud approach to run these clusters in different public cloud providers. You can go to the next slide, Rod. Thank you. Now let's take a look at Anthos architecture in high level. So at the very bottom of this picture, we have different computing environments that Anthos can run today. The primary computing environment for Anthos uses Anthos clusters, which extends GKE or Google Kubernetes Engine, which is the managed Kubernetes offering by Google, to be used on other public cloud providers or on-prem environments. So in simple words, you can run GKE on GCP, you can run GKE on AWS, you can run it on-prem, either on VMware or bare metal servers. So this provides management capabilities to you for creating, scaling, and upgrading Kubernetes clusters over different computing environment. In the container management layer, the large box in middle, we have both Kubernetes infrastructure and applications and services that run on pods. So as you know, Kubernetes worker nodes host the pods, and pods execute and run the containers. So these Kubernetes clusters take advantage of compute, storage, and networking resources provided by each cloud provider or resources available within your on-prem environment. So in a high level, kind of like look at Anthos networking, you see two main parts. First is service mesh, which controls traffic flows and API calls between different services and gives you application level visibility. This makes network more reliable. It also helps you to catch issues before they become really problems. The second part is the underlying networking infrastructure, where Kubernetes nodes are located and use existing networking configuration. So that green box in the picture, the networking box, it includes a lot of things that you guys are familiar with: VPC, DNS, IP addressing, other networking services within your multi-cloud networking infrastructure. It includes also security constructs that help you secure communication between these different environments. And again, that's an area that Aviatrix platform can add a lot of value to Anthos. On the top of the picture, there's a container management. We have, on the top of container management layer, we have a service management layer. In a microservices architecture, a single application may consist of many services. In each service may have different versions deployed concurrently. In the case of Anthos, you have this flexibility to run these services in different computing environments and move them as needed. So the service management layer in Anthos Service Mesh becomes responsible for managing the application layer connectivity between these services. When you think of a monolith or a large application, you usually don't have network-related issues because communication happens all within the application and through function calls. However, in a microservices architecture, service-to-service communication happens over the network. And time to time, networks can be unreliable or insecure. So you may run into a lot of issues within a microservices architecture. Yeah, so for example, I mentioned if there is one service that needs to call another service and there is a network outage, how should that service behave? Should it retry the call? And if so, how often? So this is just an example of network-related issues when we have a microservices architecture. And in order to solve this type of problem, Anthos Service Mesh can provide a lot of values. Basically, it uses proxies to enhance network application layer security and visibility. Again, this is for your application to application communication. Think of that as kind of like an overlay connectivity between different environments. You still need to build and secure the underlying infrastructure, which can expand from one provider to another. And that's again why lots of our customers that run their application over different cloud providers take advantage of a platform like Aviatrix to build and secure that underlying connectivity. At the very top, there is application development layer. As you know, our Kubernetes ecosystem is expanding and creating a lot of functionalities for kind of like easy installation and management of third-party applications. You can use GCP Marketplace, which provide you the capability to deploy the new third-party solution on top of your Anthos clusters, regardless of where they're running. So yeah, on the left side, there is policy management, which is responsible for automating policies and security for multi-cluster Kubernetes deployment. So basically with Anthos config management, you can create a common configuration across all your Kubernetes deployments, including custom policies, and apply it to all clusters within different computing environments. Also on the right, there is operation management, which provides integration between Anthos and GCP monitoring and logging services. So basically you can ingest all the logs from all these different environments into GCP cloud monitoring and logging services for operations purposes. If you can go to the next slide, Rod. Thank you. So as I mentioned, Anthos Service Mesh manages your service mesh environment and gives you many features along with all of Istio's functionality. More on Istio on next slide, but service metrics and logs for all traffic within your mesh network are automatically ingested to GCP. So Anthos automatically generates dashboard to display telemetry data. So you can basically dig deep into metrics and logs. With Anthos Service Mesh also, you gain visibility into service-to-service relationship. Also, there is a module called Mesh CA, which is available for Anthos clusters on GCP to automatically generate and rotate certificates. So you can use MTLS authentication along with Istio's policies. So yeah, and again with Anthos Service Mesh, you get a lot of insight into the health of your services using SLOs, which allow you to easily define and configure your own standards of service health. Next slide. Yeah, I mentioned Anthos Service Mesh is built on top of Istio and is compatible with Istio's APIs. Istio itself is a platform to manage service interactions across container and VM-based workloads. It authenticates services across different deployment environments, which means it limits access to sensitive data only to the authorized services. Also, it monitors traffic, error rates, and the latency between all services within the mesh network. It's important to note that Istio uses Envoy proxy, which is a sidecar container. So the sidecar container pattern basically consists of a main application, for example, your web app, plus a helper container with a responsibility that's essential to your application, but is not necessarily part of the application itself. The most common sidecar containers are usually logging utilities or monitoring agents. So I'm sure by now you have a kind of like a good idea on why to enable service mesh. So kind of like to sum it up, with service mesh, you can easily automate application network functions. It gives you visibility into health and performance of your services. And also it collects logs and aggregate logs so that you can perform operations and troubleshooting tasks. And again, so all of this enable you to have that connectivity between the applications. So again, think of that as that overlay connectivity on top of the underlying infrastructure that you have for multi-cloud networking.
All right, thanks, Sam. So now we talked about the application and then the challenges that we see when it comes to deploying the modern application, which are microservices, as Sam was mentioning. And these microservices are running across multiple public clouds or private data centers. So the Anthos multi-cloud application infrastructure is, or the solution that they have is solving all the problem that comes with the application management, applications operations, the config management, the certificate that he talked about, and all those things. But if you look at this diagram on the right-hand side, the green piece, the network piece, is extremely important. This is exactly what Sam also mentioned, that you need a robust enterprise-grade advanced network solution to run those applications across multiple clouds, or could be in one single cloud. And this is exactly what Aviatrix is solving. A lot of challenges when it comes to building that infrastructure, when it comes to moving this packet from one place to another place. And it is a lot that we do under the hood, because we provide the resiliency, the high availability, the traffic engineering, the security, right? So you can do all that, and not only all that in a cohesive manner, but also following a standard architecture that you can copy, paste, and repeat in multiple clouds. That should also give you all the advanced infrastructure controls, a proper control plane, all the observability, and the operational capabilities that you need to run your infrastructure, right? Next, please. So this is a reference architecture that we have that will enable this end-to-end application stack, including the infrastructure in there, right? So like I said, the Istio or the Anthos is solving your application level multi-cloud needs, but the underlying infrastructure, the networking and security is provided by Aviatrix, and that actually completes this picture. So there are a lot of challenges that we see. We talk to a lot of customers every day, and we are solving a lot of problems for them. And this is just a subset of what I'm showing you here, but I'll just start with the encryption, right? So when you look at the encryption, it is extremely important to provide encryption that is pervasive, right? So you cannot leave holes in places. For example, when you talk about connecting your cloud to the on-prem resources, you need to provide encryption. And in oftentimes you see that these private links that you have, they're not encrypted. When you try to encrypt, you enable IPsec, but then you are limited by this 1.25 GB throughput, right? So this is where Aviatrix comes in and solve those challenges, not only to provide the encrypted architecture in the cloud, but when you're connecting to the on-prem resources or to your hybrid cloud, then we are also providing the encryption with the high performance. So basically, it's a line rate at that point. Another challenge is about segmenting your traffic in the cloud or when you're going towards the on-prem side. So in my example, I have some green and blue segments. Now, if you want to segment those, it's very difficult when you look at it from a single cloud perspective, or and when you go into multiple cloud, it's like a multiplying effect. So with Aviatrix multi-cloud network segmentation, you can create a policy. You can specify that this is my blue segment, could be prod. This is the blue, this is green. And with the single click on this policy, you can actually segregate the traffic so they're not talking to each other, right? So this is exactly the example I am showing in the middle here with my prod domain and my security domain, and there is no connectivity between them. And you can also extend this segment to your on-prem resources. So your on-prem resources here, when they're connecting, they are only allowed to go to their respective segment. And that is, again, all controlled through your intent, all controlled through your policy that you defined. These microservices, we know when they are deployed, when they're configured, they need to connect to the external entities, to the API gateway, to your GitHub, to other SaaS type services. So there is a need to send this traffic out. Now, if you follow the legacy approach of creating the source IP or destination IP port-based rules, you're not going to get the security that you need. You will not be able to actually follow the compliance model that your organization has. So in order to cater those type of challenges, what we have is something called egress FQD and filtering. So you are now creating those rules based on fully qualified domain name. You can specify that, okay, I'm only allowed to go to github.com, for example, or some other API gateway or some other service, right? And rest is blocked. So you're now creating this zero trust model for the traffic that is going out from these containers towards the public internet sites. For the PCI compliance, for the HIPAA compliance, or for other security requirement, or for the compliance requirement, you need to create or have this next generation firewall as a service in your traffic flow. So for that, we have a solution called FireNet, which allows you to service chain or chain a service into a traffic flow with a policy-based approach. So you can simply create a policy saying, this is my prod network. I need to make sure when it is talking to dev, it has to go through this next generation firewall. And that's the solution we have. We also allow you to bring your own IP addresses. A lot of time you're communicating or talking to partners. You have situations like mergers or acquisitions where you cannot control the other side of the subnet or the IP address. So that's the overlapping IP situation that we see every day, and we have a solution for that. The remote users could be coming in from their laptop. A lot of time they're working from home, especially during COVID-19. They need to have access to their respective application. So we have a SAML-based user VPN solution that allows them to securely connect into the cloud resources. And not only that, we also provide you access to the ID provider. So you can integrate this solution with the Okta or Duo and provide additional security posture for the users that are connecting into the cloud. And everything that you see here in this reference architecture is working very well with all the native capabilities that GCP provides. For example, the shared VPC constructs or the GCP cloud functions, serverless techniques that you want. You can now have this reference architecture not only applicable into GCP, but you can also connect to other services in other clouds or on-prem resources. Okay, so Rod, I think I'm gonna stop here and hand it over to you for the next section.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shahzad and Sam. Great presentations. What we want to do now is kind of just have a little roundtable discussion where we can now include Spence for the customer perspective, talk about some of the things that are happening out there in the real world. So I'm going to stop sharing, and guys, let's pop up our videos here. I think that shows everybody. So great, Spence, you're the only one who hasn't gotten to say something yet. So I'm interested in your perspective, right? There was a lot that was talked about. Maybe we can just start a little bit about telling people, what does your infrastructure look like? I know you're multi-cloud, what were some of the things that you ran into that were challenges that you think others might run into and face?
Yeah, we are definitely a multi-cloud company, and it was driven from a customer standpoint. It wasn't a, hey, let's just be multi-cloud to be more resilient. It was customers specifically requested, we would like to be here. And not having much ability to push back, we're just providing a service for them. We just said, all right, we'll do it. And we had to have the ability to be modular and expand into these other areas. And you and I had talked previously about that, where engineers, especially networking, you have to be an expert in each one of these clouds to be able to expand and be confident in those areas. And that takes a lot of time. You have to know the technical limitations. or the drawbacks or the differences between those clouds.
Mm.
So Aviatrix has abstracted that for us. And like you say, we can take the architecture and be repeatable no matter whether it's OCI, Azure, GCP, and AWS, which is where our primary footprint is in AWS. And we're able to leverage that and spin it up quickly. Instead of going through the proof of concept game where you're deploying a solution and testing it and finding out and try to work around everything as much as possible. So it's been very robust for us to be able to be a multi-cloud solution and provide opportunities or solutions for our customers, so they can come to us and we can actually, give them exactly what they want along with the software platform that they need.
Yep.
So it's been very good for us. Fantastic.
Sam, you have a lot of customers. You're talking to customers. A lot of people went into AWS early on. Would you say that there's a large base of your customers that are multi-cloud because they want some of the benefits and capability in GCP, but they already were running some of their workloads in AWS? Or are you seeing more people start right out into Google Cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's all of the above, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of our customers, they're either using more than one provider, or they have they have those strategy meeting to figure out if that's the right approach for them. And there are obviously a lot of drivers as well. So in some cases, customers prefer hybrid environments because they gain more flexibility to run workloads in each of public cloud provider. Then there are other reasons like business continuity or DR. Then there's high availability, obviously, or drivers for multi-region deployment. And that's kind of like the feedback that we get from our customers. And also, we also pay a lot of attention to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud approach and have offerings such as Anthos that we just talked about.
Yeah, that's a good segue maybe back to you, Spence. I know Anthos is a lot about the application environment. So I don't know if you're using Anthos, but I know you're working with your application teams, and they have to run some things in one cloud or another. I remember you told me a great story about having to deal with the application team and them being pretty impressed that you could spin things up like that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference when your application team comes to you and says, hey, we would like to test this out. And we say, okay, great, we can have that ready for you soon. If you've ever worked in a data center environment or having to test new products, it took you days, even weeks to set up and test a new product. And so we've been able to spin up environments and have connectivity to dependencies very, very quickly. We don't use Anthos specifically. However, we did do a proof of concept with it. Unfortunately, our monolith was already beyond where we could integrate Anthos effectively, but we do use GKE, and it's been very, very stable for us. It's been a good product for us to have, where we've also been testing our own flavors of Kubernetes. And little information about that is, yeah, we have our own flavors of Kubernetes over here in AWS, but they still don't address some of the common frameworks, like you have of overlapping IP space. How do you get cross cluster connectivity? And so you have to integrate additional solutions into your Kubernetes solution. Like one of them is Calico, where it's its own BGP container service. And my coworker Julian and I, we caught wind of that, and we're just like, you're running BGP inside of Kubernetes? Are you crazy? So we decoupled that a little bit and said, okay, let's step back, and how can we take that responsibility outside of your Kubernetes service and put that on us, which is what we do a good job of. So we mocked up a proof of concept to do overlapping IP space and cross-cluster connectivity using Aviatrix's SNAT and DNAT solutions, and it worked very well. So it's in Kubernetes, you have all these services, but how much are you willing to manage? Or would you like to use industry experts and have GKE and Anthos, which allows you to focus on your product? And then you can abstract the network piece and let the network guys do that.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
No, totally. I think we see that a lot. And one of the things that I think we see people get confused sometimes, because the whole service mesh, Anthos, it's very easy for application guys to say, wow, that looks like nirvana, right? We have everything that we need. We don't have to worry about the underlying network because it has a lot of these application connectors, which makes it fantastic, right? But I think that's where when you drill down that one next level, like you're talking about, okay, I'm running into overlapping IPs. I want to have certain security policies that are always applied that, I have to enforce from an enterprise perspective. I think this is where an Aviatrix underlay comes in to do all of those things in an enterprise way, right? And still take advantage of all the things that a service mesh offers to the application team. It's not as simple as, oh, I can ping, therefore I can use service mesh, right? It's a little more complicated underneath. So yeah, we have several customers who are in that situation where the network team is expected to deliver a bunch of capabilities, and then the application team just wants to take advantage of it as if it's dial tone. But dial tone takes a lot of effort underneath. It just doesn't happen. So I guess to that point, is that you see that sometimes too as well, Sam, when teams, the application teams are wanting to leverage service mesh, but need a more robust underlying infrastructure?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely that's underlying infrastructure is a key to kind of like successful implementation of Anthos. And as you guys mentioned, kind of like there are a lot of details and a lot of requirements in order for application to be successfully deployed and to be operated. You need to have that underlying infrastructure in order to focus on application, whether that's networking connectivity, security, encryption for data that go back and forth between different clouds. You really need to have that before even focusing on service mesh and application level.
Back to you, Spence. Let's talk just a little bit about the different environments, right? You mentioned that you have to become an expert in each one of them, and each one of them has, special capabilities and so forth. What is it about the Aviatrix platform, this repeatable design that you've talked about that makes things easier for you?
Well, for instance, one of the things that you guys highlight specifically is in AWS, you have a route table advertisement limitation with the AWS Virtual Private Gateway. Mm-hmm. We would have a significant problem with that right now. So we were able to eliminate that as a factor, where our on-prem offices and even our cloud-based VPN solution for clients goes directly to Aviatrix. And we can summarize route tables, and we can do our own custom advertisements, where you can't do that inside of AWS. In GCP, there's no concept of a transit gateway solution. So you don't have the hub and spoke architecture. And you have to find a way to leverage either peering or VPN tunnels. And so Aviatrix, again, was able to abstract those difficulties that we had, and we were able to use that unified solution, drop in the gateways, and build a full active mesh hub and spoke architecture, where we have the visibility clear down into the VPC level of the traffic. I mean, the fact that we can offload our traffic into a Copilot has given us so much visibility into what's happening in that environment. We've been able to tune some of our traffic and leverage, or not leverage, we've been able to see specifically what's happening. One of the things I like about GCP is the built-in native construct firewall solution. We had an objective to lock down that environment where we had some broad rules, and we needed to pare those down to make it more specific. And without Copilot, that would have been a really, really difficult task. So we were able to go in and see specific traffic in and out of VPCs and build rules based on that.
I see.
So there's so much visibility, and I know the cloud constructs are trying to provide that as much as possible. But first and foremost, they're just a cloud provider, and they're depending on you to have the expertise to build your Lambda or your scripts to analyze all that information for you. That takes a very specific set of skills while you're trying to focus on building your application. So Aviatrix has taken that, some of those difficult pieces and just built it into an orchestrated solution for you.
Yeah, we hear a lot from customers about having that visibility, having that troubleshooting, reducing the time it takes to identify why a problem's happening and then solve that problem. That's very difficult with some of the native cloud tools, just because you have to go to multiple windows, you have to do a lot of correlation from a human perspective before you can find out. And some of the networking capabilities, not in Google Cloud, but in some of the other clouds, the networking hub and spoke architecture is sort of a black box. They're not even providing you the data that you would need to actually do any of that kind of troubleshooting. So it makes a big difference. And you mentioned that, for Workfront, it was really a customer-driven need to be multi-cloud, to have your services delivered via multiple clouds. Another area that we see for those listening is mergers and acquisitions, right? There was a big example. One of our customers was operating in AWS, and they acquired a company whose services and technology was delivered out of Google Cloud. And it was like that day they needed to be multi-cloud. And this allowed them to do that integration and make things work really well. And you know about this, Spence, you're going through integration right now, right?
Yep.
There's a lot that goes on when two companies come together and try to make their applications work and so forth.
Yeah,
Shazad,
absolutely.
any questions you want to throw out there to the guys?
Yeah, I have one question for Sam. So Sam, you discussed about the Anthos, you discussed the DR requirement that is driving some of your customers to GCP. What are some other best or biggest drivers you see out there that are helping GCP customers? Some of the use cases maybe you want to mention.
Yeah. So I would say having that flexibility to choose basically the best product based on the use case.
We lost him again.
We lost you for a sec, Sam.
Oh, now you're back, I think. Oh. Fun times with Zoom.
Yeah.
Yes.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
There we are. You're back.
Perfect. So yeah, I tried to give you a short answer, Shazad. So yeah, so in my experience, a lot of time just choosing a right product is key for the customer, and having that flexibility to be able to choose a product based on customer use case on any provider is a key. So one great example I see a lot on GCP, customer comes to us, they're interested in our data analytics or ML AI capabilities. That's just an example that even though they have workload on other providers, they consider coming to GCP, having that multi-cloud approach to be able to take advantage of that offering.
Got it.
Hey, Sam, there was a question that came across in the Q&A, or actually on the chat, I think, that says, can Anthos integrate with EKS and AKS? And will it distribute workload across the cloud? Will it distribute workload across cloud? How does it do that?
Yeah, so so yes.
That's the short answer. Now we'll wait. We lost your audio again.
Maybe I go off camera. It
Oh yeah,
helps.
now we hear you.
Okay, yeah, so definitely that's an option. So when you look outside of GK offering that are extended to other providers, you can add other clusters as attached cluster to Anthos. So you don't get the full capabilities that is offered through the Anthos, but you can kind of have some control, and also you can use the GCP Anthos dashboard to do some management and troubleshooting aspect on those attached clusters.
Great. So answer is yes with an asterisk. So,
yes.
Which is a lot of times the case, even from us, right? So, you know, I think that we're getting towards the end of the time. I want to thank everybody for, you know, being on the webinar. Hopefully it was very useful. Spence, I really appreciate you being on and giving us your experience and background and perspective as a customer. Sam, fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed learning a little bit about Anthos and how it works with our underlying network infrastructure. And as always, Shahzad, great in-depth on the Aviatrix solution. I want to jump back here to the slide deck just to show you some next steps here. Also, there's a poll that just popped up. So we really like to get feedback from you guys. So while I go over this information, please fill out the poll, just a couple of quick questions. But if there's something that you heard today that you're interested in, you have questions, you want follow-up, probably the best way is to use info@aviatrix.com. This is an email that will go to the right place. We'll get the right kind of people in touch with you. Normally that means getting in touch with one of our solution architects who can walk through any of your scenarios that you have and let you understand both from a native cloud perspective and from an Aviatrix perspective what we can do. We also have a lot of great information in docs at aviatrix.com. So please check that out if you want to try things yourself, launch it yourself. Also recommend that you take a look in the community. We just put up there something we call a sandbox starter. And this gives you the ability to download a Docker container that will launch an entire multi-cloud network infrastructure that you can use as your sandbox and try everything that we're talking about today. And it will spin all of that up in about 45 minutes. So great, something to give a try. It's got a bunch of information in there. Also, I want to mention our ACE multi-cloud network certification capability. ACE is Aviatrix Certified Engineer. You can find information about this at aviatrix.com/ACE. We've got about 10,000 people now who have gone through the ACE associate classes and nearly 1,000 that have gone through the professional course, which is a 3-day long instructor-led course that goes into some real in-depth. Most of these are our customers. And so we really encourage you start at the associate level, but then we can take you up to the next level. And this is a certification that covers, you know, both what's happening natively in each one of the cloud from a networking standpoint, but also Aviatrix and how Aviatrix can pull a lot of that stuff together. So with that, I want to thank everybody, all of the presenters, and we will say goodbye for this webinar, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.